And welcome to this week's book review. This week we are changing gears and we are reviewing House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. You may have heard of this series, the Crescent City Series, as the third book was just released, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and the internet is going wild. So we knew that we had to make this review the next review, and that is why we're starting with the first book in the Crescent City series. Wow, that's a mouthful. House of Earth and Blood. I'm going to give you a quick summary of what the book is about. I'm going to give you some things to note as a reader, get into the setting of the book, my personal thoughts, my personal rating, and then we'll talk. So the summary is as followed. Bryce Quinlan had the perfect life, working hard all day and partying all night until a demon murdered her closest friends, leaving her bereft, wounded, and alone. When the accused is behind bars but the crimes start up again, Bryce finds herself at the heart of the investigation. She'll do whatever it takes to avenge their deaths. Hunt Athalar is a notorious fallen angel, now enslaved to the archangels he once attempted to overthrow. His brutal skills and incredible strength have been set to one purpose: assassinate his boss's enemies, no questions asked. But with a demon wreaking havoc in the city, he's offered an irresistible deal. Help Bryce find the murderer, and his freedom will be within reach. So you might already have an idea, but this is a fantasy novel. There are fae and witches and demons and angels and archangels and whatever the Astari are. It is a really, really interesting world that Sarah J. Maas has built. I'm gonna save my opinions for a little bit later. I want to give you some warnings that there are some gruesome scenes in this book. I would say that it ends on a happily ever after, not actually a cliffhanger like all the other books I've been reviewing, but this is a very, very long book. Like, this book could have literally been a series within itself. It's broken down into 4 parts. I'll get into that in a little bit. But I want to give you some trigger warnings. As always, there is drug abuse, gore, violence, mutilation, depression, explicit language, and talk of suicide. Just so you know, before you dive into this book, those are things that you will come across. Like I was saying, the book is broken down into 4 parts. The first part being what we heard in Bryce's summary, which is where she's a young adult partying, living the best life, and her friends all get murdered by a demon. The next 3 parts jump forward 2 years. And it's in the rest of the book, the parts 2, 3, and 4, that we really get to know the city of Lunatheon? It's like Luna as in moon and then Atheon. But Lunatheon is broken down into 8 sectors with 7 arches. The arches used to be a way to communicate by putting your hand on the stone thing, but now they are more tourist attractions. But the sectors are all broken down basically by race of people. We have Moonwood, Asphodel Meadows, Five Roses, Old Square, CBD, which means Central Business District, River District, the Meat Market, and the Bone Quarter. And this book, you're literally jumping around this whole map. It's actually kind of nice because there is a picture at the beginning of the map itself. And we're just all over the place. Bryce lives in Old Square. I believe Hunt lives in the CBD. Fairies are in Fyro, which is Five Roses. It's the Richie Rich area. Moonwood is where the wolves are. The Meat Market is where the sketchy people are. The Bone Quarter is where the dead people are. It's a really interesting take on an urban city an urban fantasy city. Like, I was surprised because so often these books, there's no phones, there's no like modern technology, but this series has modern technology in the world that has been built. Now I'm going to start sharing my personal thoughts in with the settings because they just blend together of how I feel about it. But I was honestly shocked that this wasn't a romance. I don't know why I had it in my head this was going to be a romantic book, but it was really more of a mystery, which took me by surprise. Maybe even a mystery thriller. Like I mentioned, there was a lot of gore and mutilation and violence, and like, I think we're all used to violence, but the gore took me by surprise. The major theme moral in this book is all about friendship. Like we know, Bryce's friends all die in the first portion of the book. And going forward in the rest of the book, it's not a romantic fantasy or romantasy or whatever they call it now. It's not a romantic fantasy like I was thinking. It really is a book deeply rooted in friendship and Bryce learning to trust again and be able to form friendships with other people after everything that happened, learning to let people in. I would say the middle of this book is pretty tame. It's a lot of detective work and a lot of story building as to where this world is going. I can't really speak to this because I haven't read the second book, so I don't know if that's accurate. But the whole middle of this book, we're like traveling around the city, we're getting to know Bryce, we're getting to know Hunt, we're getting to know their backstories and other things that have happened. And it's interesting because they're two very misunderstood characters. And you would think as two misunderstood people, they would understand each other better, but it almost like they butt head way more than the average. And what kept me going through this very long book was the banter between these two. I found it really interesting, and you can see the friendship form throughout the book. Do I think some of it could have been cut out? 100%. On my phone, it was 1,200 pages. I think the actual book itself is 800 from what I looked up. So it is a very, very long book. And in full transparency, I'm not sure all of it was necessary to get to where we got at the end. I think some of it could have been taken out, but it's still worth a read, in my opinion. I'll give my rating in a bit. So I was actually pleasantly surprised by this book because I did not like other books by this author. Other books that I've read by this author I found to be extremely predictable and like no surprise whatsoever, nothing new in terms of what I was reading. There was nothing that nothing kept me hooked and excited in the other series that I read by this author. But when it came to this book, there was curveball after curveball after curveball, and I literally never saw any of them coming. They took me 90% by surprise. I felt very emotional at parts in this book, like pulled at my heartstrings. I shed a few tears, and I'm happy with where they ended, and I'm happy with all that was revealed. Like none of it was like, that doesn't make sense. Where did this come from? I felt like everything that progressed throughout this novel stayed consistent with the characters, even if we didn't see any of it coming. And besides Bryce and Hunt, there are a lot of other secondary characters in this novel that I really liked, that were really strong characters and had interesting tidbits shared about them, even though we didn't get their whole life story. So I am looking forward to reading House of Sky and Breath, which is the second in the series, to see more of some of the other characters, like Rune and Bryce's mom. So I think that leads you into my rating. I would give this book a 3.5. My biggest setback with this book is it was just too long. I am someone that usually reads a book in one day, and I think this took me like 3 or 4 days because it was so long. And every time I would like read a page, I'd be like, wait, how far do I have left to go? So long. It was just unnecessary. Like I was saying, part 2 and 3 are really just building blocks all the way until you get to 4 when shit hits the fan. And I would have appreciated if they could have been condensed down in half, so that I could have lived my life a little bit more in the last 2 weeks. But the level of world building, the character development, I think was way better than other series that I've read by this author. The detail to the plot, round of applause for me. Like, I love it when an author can surprise me, can keep me on my toes. And my first experience with this author was the exact opposite. So this was a pleasant surprise for me, which is why I'm giving it a 3.5. Will I keep reading the series? Yes, I will start House of Sky and Breath soon. I'm just mentally preparing because I know that's also a long book and I need a free schedule for it. But that's all I have to say. I wanted to share. I would love to hear if you have already read this book, what you thought. Please don't share spoilers in the comments as other people have not. If you have not read this book, I want to know, will you read this book based off of this review? If not, there's other reviews that you can check out on the channel. No hard feelings. I didn't write the book. But of course, please don't forget to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you soon with another book review.